Hello guys, welcome to Malik034 channel. This is Mallikarjun. Today is the day 5 on my Oracle RAC internal real application cluster future series, where in my previous session I covered a couple of sessions on RAC architecture, VIP, scan and network and listener. So all those sessions are available on my YouTube channel. So if somebody missed my previous session, I request them to go back to my YouTube channel and refer them. If you are new to my channel, I request you to subscribe my channel. Please do share, like and comment. Let's get started with the today's session. Today's session is on scan. I'm going to explain you in this session what is scan, how scan works, and what is scan listener, and what is scan VIP, and how scan smart enough to handle the client incoming connection and then pass it over to the local listener, and then local listener how we try to connect to your database. So this is a flow process. I'm going to explain you in detail with a live example and demo. And then one of the smart feature of the scan is load balancing and high availability. So how scan is smart enough to manage this load balancing and high availability. So that is I'm going to give you with the example, and then I'm going to give you how to manage your scan listeners and scan IPs and scan VIPs. So everything I'm going to cover in technical in details. So I'm going to next slide. Okay, the basics of scan, basically scan has been introduced from 11G release 2, where you can have only one scan setup for one particular cluster. You are not supposed to have more than one scan setup, right? There will be only one and only one scan setup for one cluster. And then these are particular mass document, you can refer for more understanding on scan. And then this particular mass document, mass note, it says more about your scan in clusterware. So please do refer these two documents. And then I can say scan is a bundle of containers. So what do you mean by bundle of containers? It's a group of resources, a group of services. It will basically contain scan IPs and the scan listener. Scan IP and scan listener together become a scan. If you see this node 1, this scan listener and then scan IP, this scan VIP, this is together become one scan on this node 1. And then on the similarly node 2, the scan listener 2 and then scan VIP 2 together become scan 2. And similarly on node 3 it become a scan 3. So all three scan together become your scan setup for this entire cluster, right? So okay, basically scan bundle, right? I said it's a listener and scan IP. Default, whenever you do clusterware configuration and installation, there will be three scan will be installed. That is Oracle recommended, and that is a default one. So it doesn't mean that you are not supposed to have more than or less than three. So you can have more than three scan or you can have less than three scan. That is allowed. But as per Oracle best practice and recommendation, three is more than enough, or three is sufficient to handle your n number of nodes or n number of connections. So you can have more than three or you can have less than three. That is allowed, but it is not a best practice. So just have three scan. That is more than enough. Okay, so then what happens if you have three scans and if you have four nodes and five nodes, fourth and fifth, what happens? So if you have three scans, first three scan will run on three nodes, and fourth and fifth there will not be any scan. Okay, and the other case, you have only two node cluster, node 1 and node 2, and you have three scans. So in that case what happens, node 1 has one scan and node 2 has other scan, and one more scan. The third scan, either it may be a node 1 or node 2. Node 1 might be having two scan and node 2 might be having only one scan, or other way, like node 2 will be having two scan and node 1 will be having one scan. So that's also possible. So it is no thumb rule, because this scan has to run on this node, this scan has to run on this node, this scan has to run on this node. So there is no thumb rule like that. But if you have a three node cluster or four node cluster, you can have a scan on 1 2 3, and then remaining node you can leave it blank. So automatically when the failure happens, the scan will be shifted to that other nodes, any of the nodes, or any of these nodes or any of those empty nodes. So scan might be shifted to any of the nodes, right? That's what I wrote here. You just go through. And then there's other way. When your scan moves, when your scan listener moves, associated VIP also it will move along with your scan. So this is just a writing, whatever I explained, just go through this. Okay, so the live practical example what I'm going to show you my setup. how you manage it and all. So I have 2 node cluster, and just to show you my current setup, I have my ASM1 and DevDB1 and node 1, and similarly and ASM2 and DevDB2 and node 2. So the command is srctl config scan. I am running a node 1 and parallelly I am running a node 2. If you observe here, I got scan is rack hyphen scan is the scan name, and scan1 is the IP associated, or scan VIP associated with this scan. So I explained you there will be default 3 scan. Like why only 1 scan I got? I told you, right, you may have less than 3 scan or more than 3 scan. It's possible. If you just see my previous session slide, where I told you there are 3 ways or 3 possibilities you can install your scan using domain naming service or grid naming service or using etc host. So domain naming service and grid naming service are the 2 industry standards. All the customers will prefer to go with this. And etc host is like whenever you are working with your lab environment or VMs, you can go with your etc host setup. So what do you mean by etc host? So I'm just adding my etc host file. If you see scan, I have mentioned 3 scans here, but when scan resolution happens, it will pick up any one of this IP. It will try to first connect to this IP. It is once it is able to reach, it will connection will be established, and if it is not able to reach, it will go to node 2, and if it is not able to reach, it will go to node 3. So but by any time, even though I configured 3 scans, but by any chance, by one scan will be active or one scan will be enabled. That is why, if you do serial config scan, there will be one scan and one scan IP is distributed here. So it is on network 1. You can see here 1, right? This scan is running on network 1, and this is the IP, and this is subnet, and this is a network interface Ethernet 0, and this is associated IP 140. You can see, right? I told you only one IP, whichever the first IP it's going to detect, that IP will be assigned, right? So it is not a industry standard practice having a scan in etc host. For the lab or your just for testing purpose, you can have it for the quicker easiest way of configuration. So going to the next, you can do srctl modify scan to alter your current configuration. So it's just a straightforward command, modify scan name. You can do it. Okay, so going to the next slide, there are, like I told you, scan is smart enough to handle load balancing and high availability. What do you mean by load balancing and what do you mean by high availability? So there is a 2 term I mentioned there: client side load balancing and server side load balancing. So server side load balancing is the actual load balancing, and client side load balancing is, I can say that it is a high availability. So high availability means if you are try to connect to one server or one IP, if it is not available, it has to go to other IP. If that is not available, it has to go to other IP. That is at any point of time, once the client or customer try to connect, it has to go to the any one of the surviving IP. So that is mean by high availability. So I'll go back to my 3-tier architecture here. If you see my scan setup here, right, like my scan, I made it as a resolve into 192.168, 1.200, 192.168, 1.300 and 400. You can see 200, 300 and 400. So what happens if the client try to connect, it will go to 200, and if 200 it is not able to resolve, and immediately that is switch to 300. If 300 is not reachable, it will immediately go to 400. So likewise, it will pass it to the any one IP in the scan. It is going to resolve any one of the IP, and then it will try to connect to your database. So that is how load balancing will happen at the client side. That is called client side load balancing. That is kind of high availability. So if the 200 IP is not available, it will go to 300. If 300 is not available, it will go to 400. Kind of high availability. So that is called client side load balancing. Then coming to go back to my slide. Coming to server side load balancing. So what happens? See, you can see here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 clients and then 1 application server. 6 are trying to connect. So right now you can discard these connections. I have this client trying to connect, and this client is going to get 200, 300. Okay, so when this particular client connection tried to connect, it will receive 3 scan IPs. It is trying to connect to scan, and then it will get a 3 IPs like 200, 300, 400, as I told you in 3-tier architecture, right? It will receive like 200, 300, 400. First it will receive 300. First it will receive 300. If it is not able to resolve that, it will not able to ping that, it will go to 400, like 300. If 300 also not able to resolve or not able to ping, it will go to 400. Like that, this client will be having 3 connections, the three chances to connect to establish its connection. If you are not having a scan, this scan will directly go to your VIP, and then if that VIP is not able to reach, client immediately get a response back saying I'm not able to reach that node. So then your client connection will get fail. So using scan you can achieve your high availability, like it will try to connect 200, 300, 400, like 200 not available, it will go to 300, 300 not available, it will go to 400. Like that, high availability will be achieved using scan. That is called a client side load balancing. Okay, then suppose it got a 200 IP, that via 200 IP it will go to scan listener, via scan listener. Now it will try to connect to local listener. So out of this 4 node, the scan listener is smart enough to find out which node has a least connection, which node has a least load. For example, this node 1 has a 10 connection, node 3 has a 20 connection, node 4 has a 30 connection, 10 connection, 20 connection and 30 connection, but node 2 has only 2 connection. That time scan will hand over the connection to this local listener of node 2. This scan is smart enough to find out which is the least loaded connection, and then this connection will go to scan listener, sorry, local listener of this node 2, and then local listener is able to connect to database. So that is how it will client connection is going to established. So from scan listener to connection of local listener to the least loaded connected node, that is called server side load balancing. Right, so you should understand this, what is client side load balancing, how it happens HA, and server side load balancing, actual load balancing, that connection to the least loaded server. So that it happens at the server side. So you should understand these 2 concepts. Then how to add new scan, you should go with this srctl add scan -l. So I'm going to run that command. Okay, so this is the command output. I'm going to show you my srctl config output. Right, so srctl config output, this is my current setup, and if you want to add new scan, it is going to be, the usage is srctl add scan -n. Okay, I'm going to run this one. Scan name, current scan name is scan rac -scan. I'm going to do rac -scan 2, and then K is the network number. Currently network number is, you can see here, network number is 1. So what I can say, I can do network number is 2, and then subnet, right, subnet -s. Subnet is going to be, current subnet is this one, right, so current subnet is this one. If you run this command, it is going to add my scan 2, but this is going to fail because I do not have any second subnet, I do not have any network subnet. It is going to fail. So I'll try to run it and I'll show you. Let me verify my network. Okay, CRSCTL stat resource -t. Okay, see, invalid address string. Right, so I do not have any second network, so I cannot able to add it because since it is a limitation in my VM. So this is actually a command, you can add it, or you can give this particular net mask, right? Net mask, this IP address. You can give complete with this format. I'll show you one more time. Okay, so subnet / netmask, subnet and netmask, and then / which Ethernet port you are using it. right? Here currently it is using Ethernet 0, and then you can use Ethernet 2 or 3, but currently all Ethernet ports are used for me. So command is going to be your subnet slash your netmask. You can give netmask, and then you can give slash, or else you can take this as a reference, and then you can remove everything, -yes, and then remove this network, and then you can give your subnet 9, and netmask is 255.255.0, and then it will be which port. You can go ahead with I will show you. I have one netmask here, Ethernet 3, but it's already been used. So if I try that one right now here, Ethernet 3, I will see what's going to happen, because failed to add or use of registered network 2, because Ethernet, because network we already registered with the no interface specified. So it is kind of right. So if you have particular pre interface opened, and then you can add using this command. Okay, I'll go back to my slides. Okay, some particular FAQs, right? If you refer this particular master document, it has a lot of FAQs. You can, a lot of queries as answered in that. So you can refer them. You will understand in detail. So starting from 11G release 2, the scan is the default. Whenever you starting from 11G release 2, you can go with the 12C, 13C, or so 12C, 18C, and 19C. So scan is the default. It will be comes along with your clusterware setup. So there's no way you can avoid that. And then the PMON is the one which is responsible, as we already know, like whatever the client connection, PMON is the one which is responsible for the registration. And then with the introduction, or with this scan introduced in your clusterware, we came up with the two concept: local listener and remote listener. So your scan listener is going to be your remote listener, and local listener is going to be your the listener running on that particular node. Then always this scan will run on its scan IP, and then your listener will run on your local VIP, node VIP. The client connection will go to scan IP, and then through scan IP it will go to scan listener. Through scan listener it will go to local listener. To local listener, with the help of VIP, it will connect to database. So that is how the connection flows goes up. So considering FAQs, couple of questions what I have chosen here. Okay. One thing is to modify SRVCTL, scan listener hyphen port, and then the port name. Using this SRVCTL modify scan listener hyphen p, you can change the port name of that scan listener. So if I go back here, my scan listener CRSCTL stat resource hyphen t. I have already done here on the node 2. So this is my scan. Default it is running on 1521, and if by specifying the port, you can change your scan listener port. And then the other common questions: can you define another owner for your scan? No, you cannot. Default is a grid owner, and that is your only one and only owner. You cannot change it. Can you define another home? No, you cannot define another home for the scan, because scan has always run from your grid infrastructure home. Can you have more than one node listener with a scan? Right, you understand? Yes, you can have. This node can run two scans. This node can run two scans. Anything can happen. Can the scan and the node listener ports differ? Right, obviously. That is why the introduction of the local listener. Scan listener is always runs on 1521. If you want your application to listen on particular port like 1525, 1526, whatever the port you define, you can define in your local listener. So that is what it means. Can scan listener and node listener can have different port? Yes, and these are the particular MOS document how you can modify scan listener port and your local listener port. You can refer this one. Okay, going to the next slide. Okay, I told there is a local underscore listener parameter and remote underscore listener parameter. Local underscore listener parameter is pointing to VIP of that node, and remote underscore listener is pointing to scan listener. Okay, so this is a local listener example. Local underscore listener equal to description address, and then protocol your host, your rack 1, either you can give a host IP. Rack 1 is a host IP, so you have to give VIP of this rack 1. If I go to my 3-tier architecture, it is going to be node 1 hyphen VIP. Either you can give this VIP, or you can give this VIP host, or this VIP. You can give anything here in the local listener. In the local listener, you can mention, and then the port. And then in the TNS alias, always it will it will have your TNS details. So if I go back to my slides, I will show you quickly my scan. This is the without scan. You have to mention all VIPs for the client connection, and for if you are using a scan, you have to just mention your scan name. Okay, so going to the next slide. Okay, so a few like basic commands to manage your listeners, like srhtl add listener hyphen l listener name hyphen p. This is the command. It's going to add your particular node listener, and then with this you can define whichever port you want. Srhtl start listener and listener name to start that node listener, and then srhtl status to define that status of that listener. And then these are the basic command to manage your listener of that particular local node listener. And then you can give srhtl config listener. That time it will show your who is the owner. I'll run this command using a grid owner. Okay, if you see here, the name is listener owned by grid, and it is pointing to Oracle home and endpoint and listener 2. These are the like my in my previous session, if you refer, I have changed my grid home location to database home location. No, these all modification you can change it. The owner. Okay, so if you check here, I do not have any listener here on that node 2. I am going to create the listener. Okay, so I'm going to make it as rack 1 rack 2 hyphen VIP and the port 1522. Just verify my VIP address. It's going to be rack 2 VIP. Okay. What I'll do next, I'm going to start. Okay, now the listener is added. You can define okay, so port is I need to change it. Okay, so I ran with the root user, and then the listener got added, and then what I'll do, I will start the listener, and then I'll check the status. So even though I defined my listener, and then while starting it got failed because this particular VIP is already in use. So I already defined one of the cluster VIP. If I show crctl stat, resource -t, there is a one particular VIP I have added here, my VIP and my new VIP. This is already running with that particular IP address. So once you tried starting with that particular IP, it got failed. So either I need to assign one more interface and then try to change uh, my my VIP of that particular. I'm going to show you that network admin. Either I need to edit my listener at Aura and then give a new VIP, a new interface, because this is already been assigned to this particular my VIP, right? So but this is how you can define. So if I do SRC config now, right, you can see listener 1 by root, and it is default running with your the default port whatever you defined, 2011. But to start it will fail because this particular VIP is already in use. So if you define new VIP assigned and new interface is assigned, it is you are going to start that particular listener. Okay, so other command to add your local listener is the one. So I'm just going to show you this. Okay, the command is to add the local listener. Okay, alter system set local listener description address list, and then you need to define your address, that protocol TCP, and then your VIP of that node, and then particular port where it's running, and scope equal to both, and SID devdb. Right, so if I give particular rack 2-VIP, right, this is the actual command. I'm going to run it here now at the database level. You can see alter system, the command altered. I supposed to change this DB name, but for the example purpose I gave you. If I do show parameters local or listener, you can see remote listener, and then local listener, once you do this exact command, once you start your listener, that value it should show here. So that I'm going to show it once I add my local listener. But this is actually command. Actual command it is going to add your local listener. It's going to be your VIP, but make sure you have to start your local listener. And then this is the port and scope equal to both, and SID equal to devdb2. You can see here alter system set local listener. I gave address description, protocol, rack VIP, and port number, scope equal to both. My SID is going to be devdb2, and then I gave it here, and then if you see local listener, now it is pointing to your local listener. Right, if I do show parameters remote will be your scan listener. It is running on 1521. So this is how you need to add your local listener, and then once you add, you need to do register. Right, so if you see here, right, I added with using actual DB name, alter system set local listener, the host name, and then the port, scope equal to both, and SID equal to devdb. Then after giving this devdb, it has been added inside my database. If you see a show parameter local, it will show your actual local listener, and if you do show parameter remote, it will show your remote listener, that is scan with the rack scan with 1521 default port. And then the default if you want to start if you want to start your local listener, you need to have your listener file under your local on that node Oracle home network admin. You have to define your listener.ora file, and then you should have your all listener entries, and then you can start your listener. So if you refer my previous slide, okay, so that, like, either you can add it manually to that listener.ora file and then modify it, or you can add using this srvctl add listener with that appropriate port, and then you can use srvctl command. If you add srvctl, it will add it to your grid resource, so that whenever you do cluster bounds, automatically listener will be taken care. If you don't add using srvctl, manually you have to if you manually created using a listener.ora file, you have to manually start and stop. It is not automatically handled by your cluster view services. Okay, so what happens if you have a 3-4 Oracle home in your local nodes? For example, this node 1 has 3 database running, 3 instances are running here, 3 instances are running here. So all 3 instances should use different port. You have to define the listener in different port. For example, if I go back to my slide here, sorry, my command, this is my adding a local listener command. This is devdb. If I have suppose a test db, it's going to be I need to change the port 2012, and then it's going to be test db2. So I mean to say, you should have your port should be differ for all the dbs, and then this particular right. So now everyone, like, this is a particular mass document, right? All these questions are answered there. It's a good to go through this document. It has a lot of questions and answer. Whatever I covered here, all these questions will be answered in that particular mass document. It's better to refer. You should have a distinguished string, local underscore listener and remote underscore listener, and both are differentiated with the particular name and then the port. Okay, so always remember, the scan will run on only one subnet, and then your listener can run on only one subnet of that particular scans. But right, so if you are using a scan using 8 series, and if you are using your listener with some other network, like I defined k1 and k2 as a network 1 and network 2, right? So if your scan is running on network 1 and listeners are running on network 2, so you always make use of listener underscore network. Listener underscore network is a parameter where it will help us communicating between the scans and the listeners if it is having different subnets, right? So you should be aware of this use case of listener underscore network. When you have a different subnet compared to scan and listener, you can make use of these listener networks. So I hope this session is useful, guys. So please stay tuned for my further sessions. Thank you, guys.